Hey, Josh, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Excellent, thank you. You're COO of Akahu. Tell us a little bit of what is Akahu.
Kahu is an open banking infrastructure provider. We specialize in data connections with New Zealand banks and other financial service providers based in New Zealand. And we bundle all of those integrations into a unified API. So if you want to use open banking or open finance in your product, we're a one-stop shop that enables that. And we use by over 90 products in New Zealand already to use open banking in those products.
For those who don't know or are not fully familiarized with open banking, what's an easy way to explain what open banking is and what the difference is with traditional banking?
For anyone technical, open banking is really just an API for your bank account. Or another way to put it is open banking is infrastructure layer that enables your bank account to be connected to another piece of software. So as consumers, you or I can grant consent for our bank account to be programmatically interacted with by another piece of software. So to make that real, 19 years ago, Xero launched, and one of their novel features in the product was bank feeds, so that your bank transactions just automatically showed up in Xero. That is what we call open banking today. It wasn't a term back then, but since Xero launched that in New Zealand, there have been a number of other products that have launched similar features. So, for example, Pocketsmith launched 17 years ago with data feeds for personal budgeting tools. And now we see just a really broad variety of products that use either data feeds or they'll initiate payments from that software product. So if you use a payroll service now, not only can you calculate the payments to each employee, but there's a button there that you can tap in the payroll software to make payments from your bank account out to employees. So basically, it's taking all the functionality that you can do inside your bank's mobile app and allowing that functionality to live inside other software products.
Almost 6 years ago, when open banking wasn't a clear path to kind of commercializing anything, less than anything, a startup, how did you guys land on let's do this? And this is the right time for this.
There are quite a few threads to the story. So first of all, New Zealand wasn't the first to do open banking. Other countries have shown that there is consumer demand for that kind of connectivity. And then the early wave of products like Xero and Pocketsmith in New Zealand showed that New Zealanders also want that same sort of functionality. But really, the journey for Akahu began when my colleague Ben Lynch was working at Xero in the bank feeds team, using a global intermediary for connectivity with the New Zealand banks. And the New Zealand connectivity wasn't that great. He knew it could be done better. So as a side project, he started tinkering around with his own bank accounts and basically reverse engineering the bank systems so that he could programmatically interact with his own bank accounts. So that was a side project. It developed into a proper project in 2017. So that was Ben Lynch and Oliver Fawcett also joined in 2017. And the two of them built and experimented with a whole lot of open finance features. So they built the infrastructure layer, the connections with financial service providers, and they built and experimented with a lot of experience layer features too, like aggregation and automation of movements of money between accounts. I joined those two in 2020, and that was the stage at which we thought actually the time is right to start commercializing some of the systems that have been built. And at that time, so 2020, the government was starting to make noises about bringing in open banking regulation. And we felt that the direction of travel would be similar to what we'd seen in the UK and Australia. We felt that regulation would be 1 or 2 years away from that point. So we decided, let's get a little ahead of the curve. We'll come to market and we'll move into that regulated environment as soon as it's operational and ready for us. That turned out to take longer than we expected. It took 5 years before that regulation will arrive in December 2025. But yeah, well, it turns out we've been further ahead of the curve than we expected to be, but it's still been great to be in market and building momentum and using these unregulated forms of open banking to show the consumer demand and show the functionality that we need in the regulated system when it comes online. Open banking has been talked about in New Zealand for a really long time. And so there was that first wave of products that used different methods to bring data feeds into their products, and that showed the consumer demand. Then actually other countries started developing regulated open banking regimes. And it begged the question in New Zealand, are we going to need regulation here to make, official open banking a thing? And back in 2017, the banks decided to get ahead of that. So via an organization they own called Payments New Zealand, they have been working on open banking API standards. And so they were, and for the first few years of that, saying there's no need for regulation. We're doing this as an industry. But as it turned out, there were problems that just weren't able to be solved by industry because there are some inherent conflicts of interest between the interests of the banks with open banking and the interests of organizations that want to use open banking APIs. So trying to work through those conflicts of interest together as a group has proven to be really hard. And so regulation has been needed to come in and sweep all of, or adopt what has been useful work out of those groups, but also bring in rules to address the sticking points that we haven't been able to work through as industry. So there have been people involved in the development of those ecosystem for many years, but what we are getting to is this point where a regulated open banking system is becoming operational, and that will be the long-term operating environment for open banking in New Zealand. So it's really exciting for us. That is where we're going to invest our time into making that environment work really well. And all of the traffic that we manage on behalf of those 90 plus products that use open banking, we'll be migrating that traffic into the regulated system over the coming year.
Was that clear from day one how much work and kind of time and effort would be in the lead up to today?
I got interested in open finance because I'm a bit of a personal finance geek. And so what appealed to me about open finance is the ability to aggregate your financial data into one place and then manage your financial life from there. So one of the things that I love about personal finance is the ability to set and forget behaviors that compound favorably for yourself. So if you can, for example, whenever you receive income, split a portion off and put it into a growth fund, and that just happens in the background every week. That's the kind of behavior that you can do easily with open finance, those set and forget behaviors. So I got interested in open finance and open banking because of my interest in personal finance. And to be honest, I didn't expect to be at the infrastructure layer, at the connectivity layer of open finance, but I guess I've ended up there because it's so important that that foundation layer works well. It has to work well for people to be able to build those products on top. So we're nearly there. Like the foundations are emerging with this regulated environment, and that will settle down the rules of how it all works, and everyone will have a level playing field to build on top of. So in a couple of years, I would hope that we're not even talking about the infrastructure layer. What we should be talking about is the product layer or the experience layer where consumers are getting value out of open banking. And we're not talking about the plumbing. We're not talking about the rules. We're just talking about the features that have been enabled in products that consumers are actually getting value from. So yeah, my journey was a bit of a twisting one to get to this point, and it's been many years at the infrastructure layer. And at some point, we'll call the infrastructure layer done. And yeah, I'd love to build something one day at the product layer on top of this open banking infrastructure as well.
Excellent. What was the vision for what you were going to build in Akahu in 2020 versus what happened where we are now? And if we look into 3 years from now, hopefully, fingers crossed, the building, the plumbing is totally done and we can move on to the next level. But how does that look versus, the beginning of Akahu?
We've stayed remarkably close to the vision since we launched, which is really just to do a brilliant job of the infrastructure with connections, with data enrichment, with other shared services that apps can use to build. And so that is what we've done. We've also stayed true to focusing on New Zealand. We've seen others in our space, peers that do this sort of thing in other countries expand geographically, but sort of get a bit too thin on the ground and not do a great job in each of the markets where we serve. We've wanted to focus on New Zealand, make sure that we are the best at what we do here, and basically get the job done at the infrastructure layer for New Zealand. The things that have been different to what we imagined is some of the use cases. So when we started offering connectivity as a service to other developers, we started hearing about use cases that we had never imagined. A few examples that come to mind. One is identity verification. It turns out that banks hold some really useful information that can be used to accelerate an onboarding process with another financial service provider. Another example is payroll payments, where businesses want to link their bank account and make payments from the payroll software instead of having to export a file and process that with their bank. And a more recent example is we've been doing a lot of work with loan applications and providing the connectivity and data enrichment and PDF processing for those processes. But it turns out that that process is actually remarkably similar to the jobs to be done for a KiwiSaver hardship application or a financial advice fact find or other forms of financial assessment. So over the last year, we've seen this big increase in usage for that system, which were use cases that we just did not imagine even a year ago. So the exciting thing for us at the infrastructure layer is that we have all these use cases in mind and we're making sure that we are serving those use cases well, but then something will come in that's unexpected, and it might be that this infrastructure works beautifully for it, or it may be that we need to do some product extensions to make it work well for that new use case. But we love seeing things that we never expected start to use this infrastructure and get value out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. What was the journey in terms of finding traction, finding anyone who wanted, could use, and would pay for Akahu services? Because going under the radar or just being a builder for such a long time must have a price. We all have bills to pay. There's a team, a founding team there. There's the staff. How do you stretch that runway?
There were two big reasons why we launched this product when we did. One was our belief that the regulation would become operational in about 2021, 2022. So we were well off the mark with that. The other is that we had a bank that had built a product that used Akahu for payment initiation. And this product was a multi-bank product. And if it went well, it had the potential to be really big and be used by, a large portion of New Zealanders. So we felt that that combination of the regulation coming soon and a bank launching a product, a big consumer product, would really help to bring us into the market and show the value that we can offer to other services. That second main reason for launching when we didn't come about either. So that bank launched it into public beta, but then the CEO changed and the exec changed, and that product never got launched never got launched in full. So we had some roller coasters along the way, and that first year definitely did not go the way that we expected. And we basically just had to claw our way into other use cases and earn little bits of business here and there to get going. And then it started to build up like a snowball. And it's been easier and easier the longer that we've been in market and the more that people have seen us in other products. So it's gotten to a point where it really is building on itself. But yeah, that first year, there were twists and turns that we didn't expect. And it was a lot more hairy than we expected going into it.
Yeah. I can imagine. What sort of things do you lean on or do you lean into when the clear path doesn't seem to be working?
I think one thing that is really important is that you have a strong founding team and you like working together, because if you feel like you're putting out good product and the timing might have been a little bit off, you might be a bit early, but you've got the right team to deliver the right product and the demand will come. If you have confidence that over the medium term, the dynamics haven't changed, you will get there, then I think you can stay the course. We were also getting some signal from customers that the product was right. So we were winning business. It's just that we didn't have that use case that had 1 million Kiwis using it. We hadn't had something that had gone into high volume. And so for an API product where we're primarily charging fees based on volume, it means that we're winning good customers, high quality customers, but the volumes weren't high. So we're building up a customer list, but, we were having to stay really lean so that we weren't getting through our runway too quickly. Scaling before that demand has come online is just so risky, because then you're at the whims of capital markets to keep the engine running while you wait for that demand.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. A lot of the people listening or watching this will be early stage founders or people just about to start something. And one of the challenges or the areas that they'll have to face is, do they build for New Zealand only? Do they build global from day one? You've stuck with New Zealand. That was a decision from early on. What are some of the opportunities and some of the limitations that you found by staying kind of loyal to that?
I think this question can get a bit tribal, where some people will say you got to be global from day one. You need to look for the big markets. And there's a lot of merit to that. If you're trying to build $1 billion business, if you're trying to build something that goes into massive scale, then you probably do need to look outside of New Zealand. And thinking about that from day one or from an early stage makes sense. But there's no reason, or there's no rule that that's the only way to do it. You can absolutely build a great business within New Zealand if you've got the right product and the market is big enough locally. So I try not to be tribal about it. There are different ways to build businesses, and it depends on what you care about. For me, I care about financial well-being of everyone, but particularly for people that live in New Zealand. And so I'm quite happy to limit the market size for Akahu and focus what we do here, because I really care about open banking and open finance being used to improve financial lives here in this country. So it doesn't worry me that the market size isn't enormous. It's big enough for us to build a great business. It's never going to be a multi-billion dollar business, but that's fine. What we're doing is important for New Zealand. We really care about the impact we can make with our offering. And so it's compelling for those of us within Akahu.
In saying that it's limited, I guess, a pool in New Zealand, we are talking about millions of transactions daily. Still, we are not talking about only a dozen or two. So I imagine there's still a bunch of business to be made through sticking to New Zealand. There's we're 5 million, but we all transact, or most of us transact a number of times a day in different ways. So there's there's been a recent partnership with Westpac. What's the meaning of that, and what does it mean for Akahu? What can people access now that wasn't previously available?
We work with Westpac in a few different ways. Not all of those ways I can talk about, but a couple that I can. One is that Westpac is actually a shareholder of Akahu, and they've been involved since the end of 2020, just before we launched Akahu services to market a month later in January 2021. And the other publicly visible part of what we do with Westpac is transaction enrichment. So if you open the Westpac One app on mobile or on web and you tap on a transaction, that transaction would have been sent to our transaction enrichment API, where we would have seen if we can match that transaction description to a merchant in our merchant database. And if so, we'd return data about that merchant, like the logo and the trading name, the website, the address. And Westpac then displays some of that merchant information to the customer within the mobile or web app. So the idea here is that everyone's experienced that situation where you look at a transaction in your bank app and you don't recognize it, you freak out, you think that someone might have stolen your card or someone's got control of your bank account. And a lot of those people would then call the contact center for the bank. And often that would be resolved pretty quickly by figuring out in a conversation that that actually was you. Here's some more information about the transaction. So that's really one of the primary drivers, is that people can self-serve. They can look at a transaction, and with that additional information, it all makes sense. And they don't need to call up the bank and spend 20 minutes on the phone trying to figure it out. That's a starting point, but there's some exciting things you can do once you've got that enriched data. You can imagine things like personal financial management tools. You can imagine more automated loan application processes. There's a whole lot of things you can do once that enriched data is sitting there. So this is the starting point that's visible in the Westpac apps now.
When you look at the life cycle of how mature open banking has been in other places, in a percentage, where are we at? Are we kind of 50% there compared to a UK ecosystem? Are we way behind? Are we actually pretty close? And what is the opportunity for New Zealand with open banking? Is the opportunity in catching up, or is it actually in going one level up and innovating further than what we can currently see in other places?
Yeah, so in a lot of countries around the world, open banking is still unregulated. Like the US, for example, is still unregulated. Similar to New Zealand, they have got regulation that's in draft form, but they haven't gotten to the point where that's been finalized and become operational yet. And then there are countries where open banking has become a regulated activity, like you mentioned, the UK and Australia as examples. In New Zealand, we certainly have not been in the first pack of countries to become regulated for open banking, but we are in, I would say, the second or third pack of countries to get there. And there has been an opportunity to learn from those countries that have gone before us. So I think New Zealand's regulation is the best designed out of open banking regulation in any country in the world. And I think that plus a few other reasons will lead to us getting better customer uptake of open banking in New Zealand than we've seen in the UK, than we've seen in Australia. Some tangible examples are in Australia, the open banking regulation has different data protection rules that follow the data that has been shared using that system. But that actually makes it really hard for organizations to use that system because all of a sudden they have to silo that data to treat it differently than data they've collected for other methods. In the UK, another example would be whenever a customer granted a consent, the maximum length of that consent was 90 days. So if you imagine Xero giving consent every 90 days, you start to get a whole lot of people falling off and not re-upping the consent. And then it's hard for the accounting software to join up the data after that consent has been re-granted. And it just leads to all this friction that is unnecessary. So New Zealand has looked at what has happened in those other regimes and, in my view, made really good design decisions to keep our regime in New Zealand really simple and easy to use, easy to adopt. So I think that's one reason that the New Zealand regime will get great customer uptake on a per capita basis. There's a couple of other reasons. One is that the New Zealand regime will launch with both data and payments. In Australia, they've had regulated open banking for 5 years, but it's still only data. So that does limit the use cases that have been able to use that regulated system. And the third factor I'd point to is that the banks aren't starting from a still start. They have had open banking APIs in market for some time, and some of the issues with early versions of those APIs have been resolved. So they're not going from 0 to 1 when this regulation comes online. They've had this warm-up period to start addressing some of the issues and get those APIs into a place where they are more ready for commercial use cases. That has not been the case when those regimes came online in the UK and Australia. There was all sorts of non-compliance and really made it tricky for organizations to use the regulated system because the bank APIs weren't up to the standard. So in New Zealand, I actually think we're going to get faster consumer uptake than the UK and Australia. So we'll be behind in timing, but my hope is that we'll actually surpass those countries on a per capita basis within 2 or 3 years.
Yeah. And so from a Akahu perspective, are you seeing more, do you have more inquiries, more interest the closer we get to actually this being live and usable for many companies? Are you seeing startups for wanting to partner up and use your infrastructure? Or is it more established businesses wanting to open up different revenue streams and services?
Yeah, the open banking regulation is definitely driving more awareness and interest in using open banking. I'd say with startups, we've always had a steady stream of interest and people launching products that use unregulated forms of open banking. Where we've noticed the biggest difference is larger organizations that have been sitting on the sidelines, waiting until the environment for open banking becomes stable enough for them to build a product that uses it. And so, a good public example is that the IRD is currently going through a public RFP process for open banking services. Now, I don't think that would have happened a year ago because the operating environment for open banking was just too uncertain, too messy for an organization like that to be comfortable with it. But with the operating environment, with the regulation, then all of a sudden you can read the rules, understand how it works, know for certain that, you're not going to get rug pulled on access or terms that make it difficult to operate your product. And so all of a sudden, those bigger organizations are happy to start considering how they're going to use open banking in their products. So next year, for example, I'm expecting that some of the major banks will be using open banking, not just providing open banking APIs. And we'll start to see that show up, for example, in loan application flows. So next year will be the year of adoption.
Yeah. Yeah. AI, what's the impact of AI kind of in your personal daily work, but also in the roadmap? Has it changed things for Akahu, or you're not implementing AI in any stretch of the way?
Yeah, it's definitely impacting the way that we work and the features that we focus on and the way that we can enhance our existing services. Open banking plus AI is even more exciting because all of a sudden you can aggregate your financial data into one place and have an AI that is looking out for your best interests. So it can tell you when your deposits should be earning better interest. It can move you into an account that earns that better interest. It can tell you when a loan's coming up for renewal and scan the market on your behalf and move you to something that is better for you. So the data that the AI can access is what open banking does, but then AI can go and do the work for you to optimize your financial life and make it really effortless to put those jobs on autopilot.
Yeah. But when you think about the products and services that Akahu is building, how much is that influenced by your own will to build in a certain direction versus AI versus regulation versus public demand? People coming at you and say, "Hey, can we use it in this way, or can you build that?"
At the infrastructure layer, we don't want to be too opinionated about what people will build because basically we have to work with the technical constraints of the bank APIs because that's our source data, that's a source functionality. But then we want to paper over all the idiosyncrasies, add other services like transaction enrichment that should just be done at the infrastructure layer and provide a brilliant foundation and surface for people to build against. So we have technical limitations in some respects in terms of what the bank APIs can do, but then we can add other services and wrap it around that commoditized connectivity so that people can focus on what differentiates their products and just build the experience that they are differentiated for. So we definitely like to hear about use cases that we haven't thought about and like to think about whether we can build product extensions or new features that really make that use case fly. But that's just the same case for any business, I think, where you're always listening to customers and wanting to figure out where to go with your roadmap. So I don't think we're any different in that respect.
When you think about 2 years out from now, if everything goes fantastically well for Akahu, what is it looking like? What sort of things come to mind? What are you guys doing? Who are you guys servicing? Is there a bigger team? What's happening?
There'll be more than 1 million Kiwis that have used open banking in a product that is supported by Akahu. And, if we're really successful, people won't even know the term open banking. It just shows up as a better feature or a product. They don't care about how it works, how the plumbing works. That just is in the background. Open banking works seamlessly and they're getting value from that product layer. So 1 million Kiwis in 2 years would be my dream.
Nice. Excellent. Hey, Josh, I got a couple of rapid fire questions here, just to close on this. The first one's, what fintech trend are you most excited about in the next 12 months? If you think into next year, what's the thing that excites you the most in fintech?
One of the things I think is exciting for New Zealand is that we're getting more challenges into the banking sector in New Zealand. And one of the problems that I'd love to be solved is people getting paid well for their deposits. There's a lot of people that are worried about rates on loans, but rates on deposits is costing New Zealanders billions of dollars every year. And so if there was more competition for deposits, it would really put those billions of dollars back into the pockets of Kiwis. And competition is the only thing that's going to drive that. Open banking can be used to support that competition by challenges, but we need the challenges as well. And that is starting to come in New Zealand. So my hope is that, one or more of these challenges really get some scale and get the uptake and start to put that money back into the pockets of Kiwis.
Excellent. Excellent. What's one regulation that you wish the government would prioritize or remove, if possible, for fintech growth, just at, the clip of your hand?
It's a silly little one, but address verification as a requirement for AML has never made sense. It has never prevented money laundering. The government has committed to removing it as a hard requirement, but it hasn't happened yet. So in the interim, you have a stodgy onboarding process where a financial service provider needs to collect evidence of your address, which again does nothing to prevent money laundering. So the sooner we can get rid of that as a hard requirement, the better.
And if that goes away, what changes for you kind of, or for the process in practical terms?
That would remove business for us because we currently offer a service for address verification using a bank account. So I'm doing ourselves out of revenue here, but I think it's the right thing for New Zealand to remove that as a requirement. The impact that I'd like to see is that it's easier to onboard with the new financial service provider, because otherwise someone could compare the options, decide where they want to switch, but then hit the inertia of actually onboarding with a better provider. And we need to remove that inertia so that people can just effortlessly optimize their financial life. So if there's another financial product out there is better, it's a better rate on the loan, it's a better rate on the deposit, it's a better managed fund, it should be easy for that person to go and switch to another provider. So we've got to make sure we're keeping those onboarding processes as seamless as they can be.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. On to the last two questions here. If you were not COO at Akahu, what would you be doing?
Building a challenger bank in New Zealand.
Hey, nice. Okay. So big dreams on both angles. Do you think there's scope for spinning something else out of Akahu?
With Akahu, we talked about focusing on New Zealand, and we don't have to stay narrow with our offering with that strategy. So we can go broad, and we have started to go broader. So for example, we offer a transaction enrichment service, which is not even open banking. We do PDF processing, which is useful for loan applications and other forms of financial assessment. We do some identity verification services. So we can continue to broaden out the services that we offer, especially as our customer set expands and we start to understand ways in which they'd like to offload some of their products to us at the infrastructure layer. That gives us a roadmap to work against if we see it fitting in with where we're taking Akahu. So, there's the narrow open banking connectivity component, but that's only one piece of the puzzle. We are focused on New Zealand, but we can and are going broader than that. And I find that really exciting, figuring out ways to work with these existing customers and new customers to, they allow them to offload more and more to the infrastructure layer so that they can focus on what it is that makes their product differentiated.
The last one has to do with social connectivity. I've had you presenting at a couple of events. We had Ben and we had Akahu, supporting and showing up a number of times. We saw each other at the High Tech Awards as well. I'd love to hear a story of, showing up in an event or, in a personal networking situation that changed of the directions for you when you met someone that that was really meaningful, that you learned something, that you took advice and influenced your.
I think it's so important to get out from behind the computer and be with people. And it just, I don't know how many hands I need to count the number of times where I've had a conversation with someone who I thought had a pretty good understanding of what we do at Akahu, but it turned out they didn't. And we're amazed by what we could do. And all of a sudden that leads to a trial or them actually using our services in their product. And so many times I would have expected that person has been following our journey because we did a LinkedIn post or we did a blog post. But no, you really do need to connect with people and understand what's happening in their world and what they are focused on. And amongst that, you'll find those gems. You'll find those reasons to have a commercial conversation rather than a catch up. So the social side of it is great and really important. But from a business perspective, it is also really important to have that face-to-face time.
Yeah. Excellent. I really want to thank you for your time. I look forward to seeing you many times before the NZ Tech Expo event.
Awesome. Looking forward to it.
Cheers. Thank you.